as both sides continue to work toward a new deal. But questions persist on whether both sides will come to an agreement by then, or even whether a work stoppage could be on the horizon. Now, this is what Kelsey Plum had to say. Kelsey Plum, first vice president of the WNBA.
That's Kelsey Plum, the first vice president of the WNBA Players Association, standing her ground in negotiations, and this moment is way bigger than it looks at first glance. Just hours earlier, Caitlin Clark sent a totally different message from USA basketball camp in North Carolina. The league's biggest star didn't call for a standoff. She pushed for compromise and made it clear the players need to be on the court this season, not stuck in limbo. Plum fired back by saying the talks have been disheartening and that both sides are still far apart from a deal. Two players, two totally different tones, and one key detail flips the whole situation. Clark has equity tied to a competing league. Clark chose every word carefully at Duke University on January 10th, 2025. She said fans crave the product on the floor, and that compromise has to happen on both sides. That wasn't small talk. That was the league's biggest draw stepping into union business publicly. This is the same player who pulled in 3.2 million viewers to WNBA broadcasts last season, now openly applying pressure on her own union to get something done.
We need to play in games, and y'all that are signed to these other leagues that are compromised, stop playing with the people who are not. Stop playing games. Let's get to it. Ain't nothing to it.
When she said players are getting down to the wire on negotiations, that was polite language for time is almost up. The clock is ticking, and everyone knows it. Here's where things get messy. The WNBA and the Players Union already agreed to a second extension, yes, a second one, pushing the deadline to January 19th, 2026. That's 6 extra weeks added after the original December deadline. They're already halfway through that extension, and according to Plum, they're still nowhere close. That's not exactly confidence boosting when one full 30-day extension is already gone. Meanwhile, the league's latest proposal isn't small money. It includes a max salary in 2026 with a guaranteed $1 million. With projected revenue sharing, top players could clear over $1.2 million. The salary cap would jump to $5 million in 2026 and rise every year based on revenue growth. On paper, that's a serious offer, and it's why this split in messaging is turning heads fast. The current max salary sits at $241,980, and that number is about to get blown up. We're talking about more than quadrupling what top players make, but the union says that's not enough. They want a full transformation of the pay system, a brand new revenue sharing model, upgraded standards for team facilities and staffing, plus stronger long-term benefits across the board. And that's exactly where talks keep hitting a wall. The league came in offering million-dollar salaries, but there's a catch. Players would have to give up parts of their housing stipends and vehicle allowances they already rely on. The union isn't trying to swap one perk for another. They want it all. And that's where Caitlin Clark quietly separates herself from union leadership. Clark isn't on the negotiating committee at all. Her Fever teammates Lexi Hall, Lexi Brown, and Aaliyah Boston serve as the team's union reps, while Brianna Stewart holds the role of union treasurer. Clark gets her updates from them, but she's not sitting in the room making final calls. That distance gives her freedom to speak honestly and say what others won't out loud. She's made it clear there are things worth fighting for and things worth bending on. Listen closely to how she framed it. She said players will fight for everything they deserve, but must seek compromise on both ends. Oh, that's not weakness.
It's just crazy, man. Like, you're signed to Unrivaled. You got equity in Unrivaled. Like, y'all are somewhat compromised on the situation to a degree, even if you're it's just weird, man. It's a little weird. Y'all on the board, but y'all got equity in the competitor leagues. It's all a little conflict of interest. Here it says, Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark said Friday that while WNBA players will fight for everything we deserve.
That's calculated thinking. She understands the risk of demanding everything with zero flexibility. Push too hard, and you could end up with nothing. And nothing means no season. No season means no games. No games mean no exposure. And no exposure kills the momentum that too many people seem to forget. The WNBA just had the best year in its history, and that didn't happen by accident. Attendance at Fever games doubled. Viewership records fell. Merchandise sales went crazy. Sponsors flooded in fast. This wasn't slow growth. It was an explosion. That explosion had a name, and everyone knows it. It was the Caitlin Clark effect. Even the article admits it. They say the league wants to capitalize on the WNBA's recent growth, but let's be real. They're talking about what Clark brought to the league in 2024. That window doesn't stay open forever. If there's no 2026 season, casual fans who just discovered the WNBA will drift away fast. They'll forget, the buzz fades, and the momentum collapses. That's the harsh reality nobody wants to say out loud. Most of these players may never see another moment like this again. This is their shot at securing real long-term wealth, and Clark is basically warning them, don't wreck it by locking into a no-flex stance. But Kelsey Plum isn't moving. She said players are united in standing on something. Angel Reese backed that up, saying, everyone's really intentional about what we want, and players are all together. That's classic union solidarity talk. Now let's talk about the part people keep dodging. Kelsey Plum is a co-founder of Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league launching in Miami this month. That detail matters a lot. She has equity in that league. She holds a multi-million-dollar deal with Unrivaled. She's literally on the board of directors. So when WNBA talks stall and the idea of no 2026 season starts feeling real, what happens next? Players still need a place to hoop, and suddenly Unrivaled is sitting right there as an option? This is why people keep bringing up conflict of interest. Plum is negotiating on behalf of WNBA players, but she also benefits if those negotiations fall apart and players look elsewhere. That doesn't automatically make her wrong, but it does raise serious questions. And she's not alone. Brianna Stewart, the union treasurer who's actually inside the negotiating room, is also a co-founder of Unrivaled with equity in the league. Nafisa Collier is in the same position. These are key union leaders with financial stakes in a competing league, and that reality can't be ignored. Caitlin Clark doesn't have that issue. She's not signed with Unrivaled.
Introducing standards for team facilities and staffing and garnering more robust benefits. The league has said it wants to substantially increase players' salary and other cost commitments, while also incentivizing owners to continue to invest in operating the business and building sustained profitability.
She's not tied to Athletes Unlimited or any other alternative league. Her entire value, exposure, and future are locked into the WNBA. That's why her message hits different, and why this divide keeps getting louder. If the WNBA doesn't play in 2026, she loses a full year of her prime. She can't just flip a switch and slide into another league where the money is already locked in. That's why her view hits different. She needs the WNBA to win right here, right now. The deadline is January 19th, 2026. That sounds far away, but it really isn't. Deals have to be finalized long before that for teams to function. Training camps usually open in April. Free agency starts in February. Miss those windows and the entire season starts wobbling. If there's no deal by late January or early February of 2026, the whole season is in serious danger. And according to the union's own leadership, the two sides are still far apart. That's why Caitlin Clark is speaking up publicly. She's saying this is the biggest moment the WNBA has ever had, and finding a way to play next season is critical. She's also admitting the uncomfortable truth. A work stoppage is possible, whether it's owners locking players out or players walking away. And she's clearly trying to stop that from happening. She's playing the role of the adult in the room. Kelsey Plum is taking a very different route. She keeps stressing how disheartening the negotiations have been and how distant both sides remain. She's rallying players around unity and standing firm. That kind of talk isn't about flexibility, it's about bracing for a fight. And in negotiations, public statements matter. When the union's first vice president says talks are bleak and nowhere close, that doesn't push the league toward compromise. It draws a hard line in the sand. So now it comes down to strategy. Which path actually helps players more? Clark's approach, using public pressure to push compromise and admitting both sides must give something up, or Plum's strategy, full solidarity and zero movement on demands? The answer depends on who you are, what you've secured, and how much you have at stake. If you're a star with backup options, Plum's strategy makes perfect sense. Drag the talks out, demand everything, and if it all blows up, you still have Unrivaled or overseas leagues waiting. You're not missing a check either way. But if you're a role player making around $80,000 a year with no outside offers, Clark's approach isn't theory, it's survival. You need the WNBA season to happen. You need that paycheck. You can't ride out a work stoppage and hope things work out later. That's the real divide starting to show. This isn't just Clark versus Plum. It's stars with options versus players who need the league to stay alive. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Players with the most power in negotiations are also the ones with the least to lose if everything falls apart. Meanwhile, the players with everything on the line don't even have a seat at the table. Look at the incentives. Plum, Stewart, and Collier are pushing for max salary jumps and expanded benefits.
They are looking to capitalize off of Caitlin Clark, because if there was no Caitlin Clark in this league, they would have already agreed on a deal. Trust and believe, they wouldn't be doing all this hard negotiating and this and that if there was no Caitlin Clark that came in this league and brought the numbers, brought the viewership, brought everything. Simple as that. Simple as that. Here it says, what I'm proud of is that we play with a group of women that are united and we're standing on something, Plum said. Chicago Sky all-star Angel Reese echoed that sentiment.
If they win, they land million-dollar paydays and keep all their perks. If they lose and there's no season, they're still getting paid by Unrivaled. They're covered, they're hedged, but nearly 100 players who don't own pieces of alternative leagues aren't hedged at all. They're fully tied to the WNBA, and their union leadership is taking positions that could risk the entire season. Caitlin Clark sees that imbalance clearly, and that's why she's speaking up. She's saying players need to be respectful of both sides and actually reach a deal. She even spelled it out. There are some things players absolutely deserve and shouldn't budge on, but there are other areas where compromise makes sense. That's not backing down. That's smart negotiating. It's understanding that not every fight is worth burning the whole house down for. Now compare that to Angel Reese's comment. She said, "Everybody's really intentional about what we want." That's not compromise language at all. That's we know what we want and we're not backing down energy. Reese also added that players are all together and riding on everything. Again, that's unity talk, not flexibility talk. At the same time, the league is stuck trying to pull off something close to impossible. They're attempting to massively raise player salaries and long-term cost commitments while still convincing owners to keep investing. Translation: it's about paying players more without bleeding money or scaring off owners who are already covering losses. Here's the part that rarely gets said clearly. The WNBA has never been profitable. It's been subsidized by the NBA for its entire existence. Recent growth has been real and dramatic, but profitability still isn't guaranteed. Attendance is up, ratings are up, but expenses are climbing just as fast. Teams are paying for charter flights, upgraded facilities, expanded staffs, and better resources across the board. All of that costs serious money. That's why the league's offer of million-dollar max salaries is already bold given the current revenue picture. They're betting on future growth to justify those numbers. The union's response is basically this: we don't care about profitability concerns. Pay us based on the value we create and figure the business side out later. Philosophically, that argument makes sense. Players are the product. Without them, there is no league. But practically, it's a high-risk move. Push too hard and owners may decide the investment isn't worth it. If franchises fold, nobody gets paid. That's the danger zone. Caitlin Clark is trying to bring realism back into the discussion. She's saying, yes, players deserve more, but expectations have to match what's possible right now. Get the season played, prove the growth lasts, then negotiate from an even stronger position next time. Don't risk killing the golden goose just as it's starting to deliver. But here's the catch.
The WNBA has seen, making it all the more important that we find a way to play this next season. A work stoppage could emerge if the owners opt to lock out the players or the players opt to strike. I think there are different things that we can find ways to say no. We certainly deserve that, and we're not going to compromise on that. And there are other things we can probably compromise on. You want to understand both sides and be respectful of both sides. But at the end of the day,
she's not in the negotiating room. The people who are in that room have very different incentives. And that's what makes this whole situation so shaky. Union leadership is playing hardball, and they can afford to play that way because they've got backup plans. Meanwhile, the everyday players without safety nets are praying that this strategy actually works. Caitlin Clark is stepping out front and warning that it might not. She's saying compromise matters. Playing games matters more than winning every single negotiating point. So who's right? In a perfect world, players would get everything they're asking for. They've earned it. The WNBA has underpaid players for decades, and this is absolutely the moment to fix that. But this isn't a perfect world. The league still isn't profitable. Owners have other places to put their money. Momentum can vanish fast. And in that reality, no games means no product, and no product means no leverage. That's why Clark's strategy of smart, calculated compromise might actually be the safer move. Get the season on the floor, keep the fans engaged, lock in the growth before pushing even harder next time. The next few weeks will tell the story. If a deal gets done by late January or early February, Plum's hardball approach wins. If talks drag into March or April and the season gets delayed or worse, Clark's warnings will look dead on. Either way, this public split between the league's biggest star and union leadership is something we've never seen before, and it exposes a tension that's been quietly building for a long time. The players with the most leverage don't always share the same interests as the players they represent. Watch what happens next, because if Caitlin Clark is willing to publicly step away from the union line, others might follow. And if enough players start questioning whether a hardline stance is worth the risk, the union's position weakens. And that may be exactly the pressure Clark is trying to apply. Force the conversation about compromise before it's too late. Push union leadership to loosen up while there's still time to lock a deal in. Because once this crosses into a work stoppage, the damage is real and it's lasting. Trust breaks down, fans drift away, sponsors hesitate, and the massive opportunity created in 2024 could disappear fast. That's what's truly on the line here. Not just salaries and benefits for 1 year, but the entire direction of the league. Whether the WNBA builds on this moment or wastes it. Whether players reach real generational wealth or settle for another modest bump. Whether the league finally stands on its own or stays dependent on NBA support. Caitlin Clark gets that. She sees the big picture and she's trying to make sure everyone else sees it too. The real question is simple. Are they actually listening? If you want more real talk and honest breakdowns like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you on the next one.